Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to The Extra Mile. My name is Gene Gurkoff. It's a cold, snowy, beautiful morning in New York City, and I'm really excited for today's episode. It's an interview that I recorded back in September at the Spartan World Championships in Lake Tahoe, California, and I've been saving it until now because, frankly, it's taken me some time to process the experience of the weekend. Endurance has always been my greatest strength. I'm a terrible basketball player, for instance, but if the pickup game goes to 1,000, then I'll definitely win because I'll never let anyone outlast me. This, of course, is why I gravitate to things like distance running and other endurance sports. If it's just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other, then I can do it. I'm really good at enduring mild amounts of suffering for long periods of time. But then I did my first Spartan race in Lake Tahoe, and it really helped crystallize some things that I've been thinking about for a long time now. You see, in a Spartan race, there are obstacles. It's not just about endurance. You've got to lift heavy things, really heavy things, climb over walls, traverse monkey bars, swim in freezing cold water, throw a spear at a target. You've got to figure things out. And if you can't do one of the obstacles, then you have to do 30 burpees in order to advance. So I ended up doing a lot of burpees. And that meant that I was able to finish the race, but I wasn't able to do all of the obstacles. I found this to be a much more interesting and apt metaphor for so many things in life, and it got me thinking that I need to challenge myself in ways other than just seeing how far I can go, how long I can endure. Which makes this episode especially relevant for me and hopefully for all of you. It's an interview with Charlie Engle, one of the greatest endurance athletes of all time. Charlie is perhaps best known for when he ran across the Sahara Desert. There's a great documentary on iTunes if you want to go check that out. But he's also faced and overcome a lot of other obstacles in his life, including alcoholism and even more recently some time in jail. These are real-life obstacles, not the types of obstacles that we voluntarily seek out when we sign up for a Spartan race. And to hear how Charlie faced and overcame these obstacles can provide us all with some insight for how we can face and overcome the obstacles in our own life. You'll also hear a sneak peek into Charlie's next adventure. I won't tell you what that is, but it's amazing. And he shows us how we can all go from the lowest point to the highest point in our lives. Before we jump into it, I want to give a huge shout out to our newest sponsor, SlowMag MG. SlowMag is a supplement of magnesium chloride and calcium, and it's very helpful for proper muscle function. A healthy diet and staying hydrated are key, of course, and we all know the importance of electrolytes like sodium and potassium, but magnesium is also really important. Studies have shown that when people are low on magnesium, they expend more energy and use more oxygen when working out, yet 7 out of 10 Americans don't get enough magnesium from diet alone. Supplementing with SlowMag MG can really help you get back on track. A couple of legal disclaimers here. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. SlowMag is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, but I personally use magnesium supplements when I'm training for my longer endurance events, and that's why I reached out to SlowMag to see if they'd be interested in sponsoring us. I was so thrilled when they said yes, so please give them a look over at slowmag.com. Huge thanks to SlowMag for sponsoring us, huge thanks to Charlie Engle for sharing his story with us, and huge thanks to all of you for joining us. Now, without any further ado, let's turn up your volume and turn on your charity miles and come along for the walk or run with me and Charlie Engle in Lake Tahoe, California. Every mile matters. Welcome back to The Extra Mile. It's a beautiful day in Lake Tahoe, California. We're in California, right, Charlie?
We are. It is California.
And I'm here with Charlie Engle, who is an extremely accomplished endurance athlete and author and speaker, and has an incredible life story that has had many twists and turns in it, which we'll probably get into. And in fact, it has so many twists and turns that I don't really know where to begin. But maybe we'll just begin, Charlie, if you could describe for the people listening where we are right now, what we're looking at.
Well, thanks for having me on. We are, it's a great place to have a walk and a talk because we are surrounded by mountains in this basin right here in Squaw Valley, California. And when I was probably 30 years ago, I used to come up here, and actually this is one of the first places I skied.
Yeah?
And
Are you from California?
No, I'm from North Carolina, but
Okay.
I lived out here long enough that I got a chance to come up and be a really bad skier for a little while. And this is part of my story is about being sober, which we'll get to. But let's just say at that point I was not. Let's just say this: the appreciation I have for the beauty we're looking at right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sunny. It's probably certainly in the 70s. It might even be 80 degrees. The other reason I know I'm not in North Carolina and I'm in the mountains is I got here yesterday and I'm like, why can't I breathe? I'm like, oh yeah, altitude. And so we're staring at a mountain. It seems like it goes straight up, and there's a chairlift, and obviously we're a couple months away from the snow season. And what's up, man? And we're seeing amazing. That was a Spartan Pro right there, who's going to be racing tomorrow. And it's intimidating to me to be here, actually, because we've got. I have done a lot of endurance events in my life, and I've done some Spartan races. But the athletes that are here for the Spartan World Championships, they are freaking phenomenal. The best ones here, the top kind of couple hundred are just ridiculous.
Right. So have you done a Spartan race?
I've done quite a few of them now.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
how does it compare to some of the other ultra endurance events that you... Because you've run across the Sahara Desert, so what's harder, Spartan or running across the Sahara?
Well, let's just say I'm humbled every time I do a Spartan race, and I think, look, to dive right into it, I think it's actually that is it's one of the things I'm most proud of is, the easiest thing for me to do, which sounds funny to some people, but the easiest thing for me to do is to go out and run 50 miles or to go run a 100-mile race or something like that, because I know what that pain feels like. Right. I know how to get through that. I know how to hydrate and eat and do all the things necessary, and I know it's going to suck. Right. I know what to expect. But there's 2 or even 3 of the obstacles on Spartan courses, Twister being one of them, which is this maniacal, bizarre monkey bar-ish sort of a thing that I have yet to ever get through. And so I know every time I get to that, and unfortunately I have this mental block. I think that every time I get to that obstacle, I might as well just get down and start doing my 30 burpees because I can't do it. So I think the mentality of it is, what's cool is I'm sort of anonymous out here. I like to say if I was if I did a 100-mile running race and I came in last place, a lot of people would write to me and say, what the hell happened? What's wrong with you? Are you injured? Say, what's going on? Tomorrow, if I do this race and I come in last, no one cares. Nobody cares. And I like that.
It's interesting how you talked about, with the endurance that you could do 100 miles, or there's probably not. Well, let me ask, is there a distance that you're like, I don't know if I can do that?
Not really. I mean, I think that given the right circumstances, with hydration and nutrition and whether there's support or not, I think that we're capable. I mean, we're built for running. Mankind is built to run and to move. And I think that it's about preparation, and it's about mental health and understanding that it's going to be difficult when you go off and do something like that. And if you don't think so, then give it a try. But I think what it is too, it's about not seeking comfort. I think it's a real mistake for a lot of people to always be looking for the perfect training plan or the perfect whatever so that they can get through something in the easiest way.
Yep.
What did you ever learn from getting through something that was easy?
Right.
And so this is this is calculated suffering, where you get a chance in a pretty controlled environment to test yourself against a really hard challenge. And I think that just about any distance out there is doable. I mean, there have been people who've run all the way around the world, or I have a great friend who's running about 5,000 miles right now. He's about halfway through, running from all the way up in Alaska all the way down to Key West, Florida.
Oh, nice.
So,
we had a member last year who walked from Key West to Blaine, Washington.
Wow.
So now Alaska, but I'll tell you a couple other things. I kind of like to tease it out a little bit. So this person has type 1 diabetes.
Uh-huh.
And he was 11 years old.
Oh, my God.
When he did it.
Holy cow.
We've amazed even Charlie Engle.
That's baffling.
So actually, I want to, that might be an interesting segue here because I wanted to rewind a little bit and get more of the full story. What were you like when you were 11 years old?
Man, at 11, I was a little skinny hippie kid with hair halfway down my back.
Yeah.
I had very bohemian parents, and I was an only child, and a lot of theater going on for my parents, and I'm dating myself, so I was born in 62, so it's, late 60s, early 70s, and I'm definitely not playing sports. One of those years in there somewhere I played some soccer, but it was, to say I played soccer would be a gross overstatement. And, there was no hint of any... You know what I loved, though? And I think this does... I'm being disingenuous, and that is that I loved the freedom that running gave me, even when I was that age. Like, I would run... Like, I grew up in North Carolina, and I loved thunderstorms. I still do to this day. And I'm not kidding when I say I'd strip down to my underwear, and go out and run in the rain. And it's thunder and lightning, and my mother was like, go, and just being out there and feeling the rain and the freedom and just, it was amazing.
We're walking on a golf course here, and some folks are just taking a nice little shot up the fairway. Do you ever read the book Racing the Rain by John Parker?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's a great book.
Yeah.
It's a prequel to the Once a Runner series.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that book. I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
And it's, so I think, again, when I was a kid, there was an inherent love for freedom and running, and I certainly didn't appreciate, what running was going to ultimately do for me in my life.
Right. And so, were you ambitious, driven as a child? You say bohemian. I'm picturing kind of a little bit more laid back and
yeah, I wasn't
hippie-ish.
Driven. I wasn't driven, and it was, I grew up with, my parents were divorced, and I was with my mom, who was very, she just passed away last year, so I think about her a lot, but she was the most amazing woman ever. But she, I like to say I was lovingly neglected.
Okay. You're given space for
total freedom. I ran my life, and, the difference today with a lot of kids, and that makes me sound really old. I have boys in their 20s. But, we didn't have a TV. Right. There wasn't video games. There wasn't, when I was that age. So what that meant was I just spent my life outside.
Right.
I was riding my bike. I was going down and playing with friends. Yeah. And my neighborhood was in the country, so the closest house was like a half a mile away. So if I was going to get there, I had to run or ride my bike.
Right.
And so, so I wasn't driven to do anything but just kind of live. And my mom was there wasn't this desire to push me into, constant overachieving and the pressure that even my kids had when they were growing up, and the way kids are today. I don't even know how parents or kids deal with it.
What do you mean?
Well, just kind of the constant pressure. Some of it's social media. Some of it's just
pressure to do what?
It's kind of. I'll put it this way: when I was a kid, if my day was going to be filled with activity, it's because I filled it.
Right.
It wasn't because I had 3 practices and a tutor, and it wasn't just busy almost for busyness' sake.
Right.
It was because I just wanted to be outside, and I just wanted to be a kid. And I think that,
that's interesting.
In my story, as we flash forward, I did develop drive when I went to high school. I actually moved in with my father and in California, and he was sort of the opposite. He played basketball in college, and he was a business guy, and I wanted to please him, so I played every sport, and I made good grades, and I turned into this super overachiever in high school, and then I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and I thought, I thought that they would like put a banner up on the dorm, welcoming me. I was that awesome, and it took like a week to figure out how average I actually was, and the fact that there were tons of really smart people and good athletes, and that was when I sort of discovered drinking. That was when I figured out that I was actually a really amazing drinker, and could consume more alcohol than pretty much anybody out there. And strangely, that sort of became, an identity.
What do you think when you say you discovered drinking? Was it just like regular college drinking, like in the way kids do?
But this was, I was a good fourth generation alcoholic, and
did you know that?
I didn't know it at the time by any means. I knew there was drinking in my family and issues that came from it and all of that, but no, I had no real clue as to the true nature of the problem, of the beast. And so, what I knew was I liked the way alcohol made me feel. I liked the escape that I got from it. I say the way it made me feel, it actually made me feel nothing.
Okay.
And I don't, to this day, and I've written a book, and I've done all kinds of stuff, and I've certainly talked about it ad nauseum, but I actually can't tell you, other than the fact that genetically I was predisposed to be an addict with many generations, and and I was just my personality was such that I was insecure, and I found comfort in drinking, and then in my 20s ultimately in drugs, and my goal sort of became to be invisible. I didn't want to feel anything, and it wasn't some horrible trauma necessarily or anything that I was hiding from. I had a very judgmental, difficult father who was one of those guys that if I got the A-, all he cared about was why is it an A- and not an A, or if I scored the winning touchdown, it was still, what about that fumble in the second quarter?
Right.
And I grew up with that as a teenager, with that kind of pressure. And I found that alcohol made it go away.
Interesting. And so that's in college.
Yeah, so in college I also discovered cocaine, which this is the 80s, and that drug was somewhat ubiquitous at the time. And and I again, with my predisposition, it didn't just end for me. I partied in college the way a lot of guys did, but at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're going to bed and actually thinking about, oh my God, I have to go to class tomorrow. Yeah. I was just getting started, and that went on for really 10 years of my life. And so from 19 to 29, I really fell into that lifestyle, but I also was an overachiever in jobs. Whatever job I had, I would be the top salesperson, or I would be, and some of it I think was because I desperately wanted to balance the addiction. I always felt like if you're the top salesperson, somebody can't call you out on your bad behavior. And if you could buy a house, or if you could buy a car, we couldn't possibly be a drug addict, right?
Right.
And of course that's not true.
Or at least you have it under some kind of control.
Exactly. And we all know, everybody listening to this podcast either is an addict, knows an addict, has an addict in their family, knows someone that probably should be in addiction recovery. You can't escape it in today's world. And so, I was that guy, but I was likable. I didn't, I wasn't getting in trouble with the law. Yeah, I was just a guy, and I was messed up, for years, and some people would probably have said, we didn't think you were that bad. And I always tell people it just doesn't matter. I knew when I had reached a point where it was like, okay, I am done with this. Like, this is, my first son was born when I was 29, and, I think I thought that he might save me. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the way my dad was. I didn't want my son or my kids to grow up around addiction. And a couple of months into his life, I had a terrible binge that, somebody tried to shoot me, and it was just this crazy story. And I recognized at the end of that episode that I literally had come to, this isn't just a saying, like I had come to that life or death decision. I mean, death may not have come right away. It might have been a long, slow, awful death, or it could have come in an instant. But, I had to figure out whether I was just going to be okay with that, or whether, I wanted to live. And as I like to say, I had to choose between living and dying, and so I chose running.
Well, I don't know which one that is. So why did you choose running? What gave you the instinct or the inclination that you said, I need to make a change, and I'm going to do that through running?
You asked me, so our conversation started with, us talking about, I remembered, as most people do, if they can dive back into their memory banks, that freedom of a kid. Like, you come home from school, and you bang out your front door, right? And go play with your friends or whatever. There's that joy and that freedom that goes with that. And I remembered that. And look, I had been a good high school runner. And I just knew what that felt like. And so instinctively, when I finally made a decision to quit, I went to an AA meeting that night, and I got up the next morning and I put on my running shoes.
Had you ever been to an AA meeting
I'd
before?
been to a few, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, as any, as I like to jokingly say, as any self-respecting addict will attest, I tried to quit. Quitting's easy. I'd done it 100 times. It's like, it was something I had attempted, but for whatever reason, that time was different. So I went to an AA meeting, and I got up the next morning, and I went for a run.
Do you remember the run?
Absolutely. It was terrible. I threw up in the bushes, and, I think I threw up in the shower when I got back home, and it was probably all of, 3 miles, and it felt like 100. And what I did, though, is for the next 3 years, I did that same thing every single day. I went to a meeting without missing a day, and I ran without missing a day.
For 3 years? Was it always 3 miles?
No. I started running marathons, and I mean, I was still an addict. So, I ran 30 marathons in those first 3 years.
At the time?
No. What I mean is, I just mean I was still, that addict personality.
Well, you're always an addict, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time in those early years thinking that I needed to try to beat the addict out of me. Like, I needed to make that part of me go away. And it took me a while to understand that, in fact, my addiction and my addictive nature, without that, I mean, that's what made me good at things.
So on that first run, could you paint a picture? Do you have a picture in your mind of stepping out your door?
Yeah. It was Wichita, Kansas, and I was in a dumpy little apartment that I'd rented because I was working at a job. I had a whole crazy business back then where I chased hailstorms around the world. Bizarre business that I still do sometimes, but it's very weather driven, so I never knew where I was going to end up. So I'm in Wichita, and Wichita it's either hot and windy or it's cold and windy, but it's always freaking windy. So I remember stepping out that front door, it's a great question, and feeling that hot blast of wind and asking the question that actually every runner asked when you're starting a run and it's windy. Do I want to run with the wind to begin with?
Right.
Or do I want to run against it to begin with?
But then you realize it's going to be against both ways somehow.
Somehow, right. That's very good, right. Just like on a bike. It's always uphill, no matter what. How does that happen? Yeah, so I chose running into the wind. I remember it very well as I headed out, and I was just going around a big block. And it was just on streets. There was nothing pretty about it. And I felt terrible. I really did. I had to stop and throw up one time, and somebody saw me. I remember there were like kids in the car. I mean, it was this whole surreal scene. And But I got through it. And
was there anything about it that you enjoyed?
That's wow. Yes. I mean, but I can't necessarily pinpoint it, but what I inherently understood. Here was the difference between that run and a run I might have done 2 weeks earlier. Like if I don't know how much I was running, not much, but the 2 weeks earlier was an excuse or a way to like break a hangover or to just take action and get out and do something.
So you were already running a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I'm at heart, I am a runner, and I loved running. And even in college, when I was screwing up like crazy, the thing is, when you're 19 years old, your body's a lot more resilient. So I could stay up all night and run. And party, and feel terrible, but actually go out for a run at 6 o'clock in the morning. Hi. And that was a golf cart we just passed. So, not just saying hi to you people listening. I'm like, what's he talking about? Hi. But it was. So running was still part of me through all those years, and look, I wasn't for 10 years as an addict. It's not like every single day of my life was spent doing cocaine. I would get sick of it, and I'd hit a point where I'm like, okay, I'm going to clean up, and so. For a week or a month, I would straighten my life, and I would say, okay, I'm done. And I would mean it, because addicts always mean it. Like when you feel like crap, why would you want to keep feeling that way? So when I'd say I quit, I meant it. It's just that the problem comes that the day will happen where you're like, maybe I could just have one beer today, and despite the fact that in my entire drinking career, I had never just had one beer. Right. So there's no evidence that I could do that. But anyway,
Was there something about this time that you felt was different, or?
It was. My son. Having again, I think I said a moment ago, I thought he was going to save me. Like, I thought that just him being alive was finally going to put me, from a responsibility standpoint, in a frame of mind that, I was just going to be a better person.
Right.
And you know what? I was the same freaking person. I just happened to be a dad.
Right.
And so once I recognized that, nobody was coming to save me, that the only way that was going to happen was if I did it myself. And it made all the difference.
So you go on that run, 3 miles, you're puking. How long was it before it really started to feel good and you started to hit your stride, so to speak?
So I would say it probably took about 3 months, and it's strange too, and this gets very deep psychological stuff but I'll say it anyway. There was a punishment aspect of this. Like I felt like a bad person,
right?
Because, I put my family through all this. I had been on this crazy roller coaster for all these years. So part of me felt like it was penance. Like I didn't want to feel good. I wanted, like, every day when I went out there, I ran as hard as I possibly could, kind of in order to punish myself to a certain degree.
Right.
So it took me a while to get to a place where I could be out there running and go, wow, I feel really good. But it happened. It happened over those first few months eventually, and and I still, though, as I said earlier, I still found the need to kind of want to eliminate my addict. And during those 3 years, I figured out that my addictive nature is what makes me good at things. And so I need to find a way to nurture that and not stress about trying to get rid of it.
Right. And were you working towards a goal at that time? Or were you just, I'm going to go out and run kind of?
Yeah,
I ran the freedom of it.
I ran like 30 marathons. So, the goals were, and I was trying to I qualified for Boston, and I did, and this is back when you actually had to run a really fast time to get into Boston, and, things have changed. You still have to run fast times, but they're a little more, Boston actually wants 30,000 people in the race.
They just lowered the times again, though.
Yeah, well, that's people have gotten faster, and so they're making it harder. And in these days, right, you can't just beat the time. You actually have to beat it usually by like 5 or 6 minutes if you hope to get in. But anyway, so my goals were, you know what, man? I wanted to be that guy. I was happy in my mind thinking, I want to be that 80-year-old someday that's like all crooked and running down the path and like, I look like I'm about to fall over and not go another step. And I was satisfied with that kind of thinking. And I was just okay with that. And then I sort of, this is a long story, but I am gonna abbreviate it so we can cover ground. But I actually went to Australia for a job, and I accidentally entered a 50K. It was actually 52K, and I actually thought it was a 5K. Like, I didn't even know. I didn't understand that. Why would anybody run that far? It's like, it never occurred to me that someone would. I thought it was like a misprint. Yeah. And so I end up actually entering this 52-kilometer race out in a rainforest, and I have to drive a few hours to get there, and it's not until I get there that I realize what a dumbass I am. and I basically decide to just go ahead and go through with it. And so I do it was a 3-loop course, and I really just figured, okay, I'm going to run like 10 miles. I'll do the first loop, and that was way more than I planned on, and then I'll quit. So nothing I was doing was heroic. I mean, I was trying to quit. And I ended up running the first loop. I did the second. And by the time I got through the second, I was like, I have a chance to do something that I didn't think was possible and that I didn't even know existed.
Right.
And so I ended up finishing this race, and I won. So I actually won this big race. And it is a story. The long version is a good one simply because it is this idea that very often we go into things with, preconceived notions and expectations. And when you go into something without any really specific expectations, sometimes that's when the magic happens.
It's kind of like just going out to run in the rain when you're 11 years old.
Exactly right. I didn't know. I just knew it felt good, man. I just wanted to do it. And
actually, speaking of which, tying those together, since 2002, I've done at least one marathon every year. And this year, I didn't know what I was going to do. I actually ended up doing a relay. There's a 50-mile race up in New York, trail run, and I was part of a relay team. So I was supposed to do the third leg, which was like 13 miles, and the fourth leg was another 13 miles. But I was only doing the third leg, and it was pouring rain.
Yeah,
pouring rain all day. And so I'm just standing out in the rain, and I'm doing it with some of the people from the Michael J. Fox Foundation.
Yeah.
And 2 of the folks on the team have Parkinson's, and I'm just standing out in the rain the whole day waiting for my turn to run. And sure enough, it's time for me to go. And once I'm freezing. As soon as I start running, I feel good because I'm warmed up.
Yeah.
And I'm running in the rain. I'm splashing through the mud. Ended up running the third and the fourth leg. I did the fourth leg with the anchor man who had Parkinson's. I'm like, what am I gonna do? Stand in the rain the rest of the day? I have a chance right now to do something special. Yeah. Which is run this fourth leg with this gentleman who has Parkinson's, which is going to be a unique experience.
Beautiful.
And I'm so glad I did it because I could have just I'm done with my leg. I'll go, warm up or something.
And you didn't plan it. It just happened.
Just happened, and it was probably like of all the marathons I've run, one of them I just felt good about. I wasn't trained for it. I was never planning on doing it.
Yeah.
But it was just running in the rain, in the woods, in the mountains.
Yeah.
With some friends.
I think you really hit on a really interesting point, and that is that so often what we try to do in life, all of us, is just get through difficult situations. Like at the beginning, you're standing out there in the rain, and really what's on your mind at that moment is you just want to get through your leg.
Right.
I mean, that's just human nature.
Right.
You just wanted to get through, get it done. But you recognize that you had a chance to not just, as I always say, surviving something is usually just that. And what it means is that you get through it like white knuckling, or you're hanging on for dear life, and when it's over, you're pretty much the same person as you were before it.
Right.
So you haven't necessarily gained, you've gotten through it. Whereas what you chose to do, and I think what I chose to do in Australia, is to actually thrive, is to take it and turn it into something where you don't just survive it, you literally you make progress in your life. You are at the end of it a different person. And I think that that's powerful. And that's, people forget, comfort is overrated. I always make the joke, I blame the electric can opener. Somewhere around 1955, we decided in this country that we were just like opening a can the normal way was just too damn much trouble, you know? Right. And somebody invented the electric can opener. And then it's like everything that was made after that was somehow related to making life easier, as if easier had any real value, you know? And I think that it's about, and this is of course a lot of years of experience and wisdom, and I haven't always felt this way, but today I like to put myself in difficult, calculated situations because physical or business or whatever, because I do trust. Experience tells me that I'm going to come out the other side better, right, knowing more, and having had a life experience, even if it's not what I wanted or what I think I wanted, I'm still going to come out at the end of it and be better off than I was before.
And so I definitely want to jump into that. And you talk about it a lot, so maybe we'll not talk about it too much because you might be tired of talking about it. But you know, among the things that you're known for is running the Sahara Desert.
Yeah.
And I'm curious as to maybe if we jump back to where you were starting to do the marathons, you did Australia. In the abbreviated version, to cover ground, as you said, like how do you get from that to having this idea that you want to run across the Sahara Desert?
You know, it's actually, though, your question is perfectly framed because, and the answer is fairly simple, shockingly, it is that I really did just simply want to see how far I could go. Like once I went and did that race in Australia, and all of a sudden I had gone further than I thought I could go, then it was like, well, I did that. Why don't I see just how far I could go? And it led to this progression of 50 milers and then 100 milers and then hundreds of miles. And I started doing these long adventure races.
So let me ask you, why did you want to see how far you could go?
No, absolutely no reason whatsoever. Except for the fact that, again, experience taught me. I mean, there was no... You know, first of all, I had no interest in being normal. So some of this is addictive behavior in that, you know, so many of my friends wanted normal jobs and they wanted to have, you know, kids and families and houses and cars and just the normal things. And from the beginning, I did those things for a long time because it just seemed like what you were supposed to do. And, you know, when I finally kind of got free of that mentality, what I figured out is from the Australia race and then from the subsequent 50s and 100s is every time I pushed it to a new level, I figured out something else about myself. And so there was a lesson buried in there. Occasionally the lesson was, I sure as shit don't want to do that again, you know, because there were those times.
So what are some of the lessons that you learned?
You know,
was there a different lesson at 100 than at 50?
Absolutely there was. And some of that came from, some of the lessons were practical about hydration and nutrition and ways to actually do self-care. And understanding that the mind is completely related, you know, to the stomach and the muscles. So, you know, you're not giving the stomach and the muscles what they need in the form of nutrition and hydration. They send signals to your brain that say quit. I mean, it really is that simple. They say stop, this hurts, this sucks, this hurts, so don't do it. So I learned that the greatest lesson I learned out of all of that, and I think is a good way to sum it up, I think that most of us in life, the problem isn't big issues. The problem is the moments that we face. There are moments in your career or in a relationship or even on a run where it seems impossible, it sucks, and we all hate it. Anybody who says they don't occasionally hate their life, I don't care how good it looks from the outside, you know, anybody that says that, I don't believe them. I mean, maybe there are people like that who just have everything perfect all the time. But so the trick as a recovering addict, in a lot of those moments, of course, the first thing that came to my mind in the early years was, man, it sure would be great to have a drink. Or I'd like to escape somehow. How do I get away from this feeling? And so what I figured out was if I could just find a way to get through those individual moments, unscathed, without relapsing.
We just go around this way
Sure.
once a little bit?
Yeah.
Because this is interesting.
Without relapsing, without, doing something crazy or stupid, or without blowing up my life. If I could just get through that moment, then the next day things were going to look different. And pretty much without question, if I could get through that moment and that day and get a decent night's sleep and wake up the next day, it'd be like, whew, thank God I didn't drink, or, throw away all the hard work.
Right.
Because that would have been a big mistake.
So, you've done so many of these races. You've done the 50 miles, the 100 miles. You've challenged yourself in other ways, business and the Sahara Desert. You wanted to see how far you could go.
Yeah.
There's a great movie on that I'll just link to in the show notes for people who want to get, the full picture of what that was like. But what could you maybe paint a picture for like the moment of truth for you in that race and what you faced and what you learned in that moment?
Yeah, well, this was an expedition, so there were 3 of us that were doing this thing together, and we were friends. We had been competitors in previous years, and so we took on this challenge, and I planned it all out and was the expedition leader and managed to get funding, and I got, an amazing director, and Matt Damon got involved as the executive producer and narrator of the film, and all this just incredibly unlikely stuff. And, we arrived at the start of running the Sahara, in Senegal. And, again, if a sponsor asked me at that point whether I thought it was, whether it was going to be successful, I would say, of course.
Right.
If a friend asked me, can you do this? I'm like, hell no, I have no idea. How would I know? And so it's this idea that we were taking on something that was completely unknown, and that was incredible. And so the expedition starts, and we pretty quickly start to disintegrate, within a week.
How long is it?
Yeah, so the whole thing.
Yeah, like how many miles
So the
and how long were
we're
you
basically
hoping
trying
to
to run 50 miles a day. So basically about 2 marathons a day for over 100 days in a row.
For 100 days in a row.
Yeah.
50 miles a day.
Per day. And so about a week or so into it, we started to just fall apart. And it was the natural sort of disintegration of the body. And what's crazy is, though, on about day 10, it started to turn around. Some of it was mental.
Around?
The human body is very resilient. You can put a lot of stress and pressure on it. And if you'll just give it what it needs, if you'll give it the sustenance it needs and the rest, and it will adapt to the hardship. And that's what happened. So by about 2 weeks into it, we found our rhythm, and things started to look up, and we all dealt with nagging injuries, all kinds of tendonitis and overuse injuries throughout this run. But by the time it was done, we had averaged about 2 marathons per day for 111 consecutive days without taking a single day off. And
I can't even comprehend that.
It was amazing, and it was through deep sand, most of it, and it was through cultures, though, and people, and just, man, it was such a beautiful experience. Who
was a
so
person that you met that really stands out?
Well, so we went through this one project in Mauritania where it was a clean water project, because part of what we were doing was trying to raise awareness for the need for more clean water solutions in that part of Africa. And so, I met a guy who, he literally is digging canals, and they have this big water project there, and it's all done by hand. And I asked him, I had to get an interpreter, but I asked him, why are you doing this? And he didn't even understand the question. For me to ask him, why are you doing this, was so, he couldn't comprehend the question, because the why was because it needed to be done.
Right.
They needed to have water to have education, to have a functioning society if they wanted to progress. And I said, what does progress mean to you? He's like, my kid's getting to go to school. And so his answer was a variation of the exact same answer that anybody in this country would give, right? You know, ultimately what he wanted was a better life for himself and for his family, and water was the key to that. You know, without water, we can all imagine, here I am walking with a bottle of water. You know, without it, you're done. There is no life.
Right.
You know, and sanitation's a big part of it. There's no toilets, you know, girls especially can't go to school. It changes society. And so part of this run was about raising awareness for the need for clean water. And
is this for with water.org?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at the time it was H2O Africa, and that was the original foundation, and we merged with water.org, and today, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that this crazy, silly, stupid idea to run across the Sahara Desert, the true legacy is actually not not physical, and the numbers are kind of cool and impressive, but the numbers about how many people have been served with clean water, that's way more important.
Right.
And, you know, they don't know who I am. They don't know anything. Like, they don't know.
You want to cut up here?
Yeah, sure.
We can loop it back around.
They went right past their golf ball. I feel like I want a club. I want to play that ball. Playing through?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we shouldn't. Here, let's go down this way. We'll cut around there and then go back. That is one of theirs, so that makes sense. Yeah, so
you're in the Sahara.
Yep.
You're meeting these people. You got the clean water. To what extent, like when you're in those moments of truth, did you ever think of quitting?
You know, of course I thought of it, but what the gift that the Sahara gave all of us, in a way, and it's a strange gift, certainly a gift you'd like to give back, but the strange gift is that there was nowhere to quit to. Like,
it's like when you're running out and back, there's
only
one way home.
Right, if you quit, like, what does quitting mean? Like, you had no choice but to continue on, really. So
it's only one way home.
Right, and so interestingly, you know, the thought of what quitting would look like, although again, I freely admit that there was, you know, a lot of pressure from the people who had invested in this project and the money raising we were doing for clean water, and there were a lot of emotional pulls on us because of how publicly we had chosen to do it.
Right. Yeah, that accountability.
Yeah. So both of my teammates actually tried to quit a handful of times, and I like to call it that I talked them off the ledge, or I yelled them off the ledge, and you know, and I know both of them do. They're grateful for the fact that they did continue, and that they found it. I couldn't do it for them,
right,
but that they found a way to get through it. And you know, it was this pivotal part of all three of our lives. And
what was it like for you when you finished that? And what year was this again, by the way?
So finishing, 2008.
Uh-huh.
So finishing was an interesting thing. I mean, one would think that I would be the happiest person on the planet, and certainly part of me was proud and happy and relieved to have accomplished it. But the overwhelming feeling was actually sadness. You know, it was the end of something that I'd worked incredibly hard for.
Right.
And I mean, another weird thing is, like, the detachment that we achieved was incredible. I mean, there were cell phones at that point. You know, there wasn't really social media, so it wasn't to the place where we are today.
Right.
But, you know, I kind of went through all day, every day, 12 hours of running, 10 or 12 hours of running, where I didn't have to deal with my cell phone or people or rent or like...
You're out there.
Yeah, and what an amazing feeling it was to be detached from normal life. And so at the end of that, it was like I'm on with NPR the next day. It's the Jay Leno show. I mean, we got to do some really cool things that were fun, but it was all of a sudden kind of stressful again.
It's kind of like that Tom Hanks movie where he's on the island.
Oh my God, exactly.
And then he comes back and it's like turning the light switch on and off.
What was it called?
Castaway.
Castaway. There. I wanted to say Stranded.
Yeah.
But yes, exactly right. And
you hear that a lot from astronauts too, and I think it's also common in ultra, like we've, had, in addition to that 11-year-old who went across the country, there's been other folks that have gone across the United States with charity miles, and they kind of report the same thing.
There's so much peace in it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a peaceful existence when you don't have all that other stuff.
You just know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to get up and I'm going to walk.
Yeah.
There's a certain simplicity to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually reductionism. I was just speaking with the guys who were doing the container challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, part of this is just about reducing everything to just one simple task.
Well, I'm 56 years old. I just turned 56, and my wife and I laugh all the time. We've been married about 5 years, second marriage, and we have an incredible desire to have, the older we get, to have less stuff.
Right.
Like, I do not, everywhere I go now, I try to, like, even yesterday I got here, right, and I got a big goodie bag because, the VIP treatment, and you get a bag full of stuff. And most of it's consumable, so actually that's fine. I'll take food and coffee granola, and tea and granola any day. Like that's cool. But I'll try not to leave here having bought,
don't tell Joe.
5 more. Right. Well, luckily he's kind enough to give me a couple Spartan shirts, so it's okay. But and look, if it's something that's associated with an experience, that's also different. But the blatant consumerism that I used to have in my life, where I felt like I had to have, the new car every 4 years or whatever it was, and I was like most people, and I felt like heaven forbid my TV isn't flat screen enough or doesn't show in HD, and and that one's on sale for $300, so why wouldn't I go buy it? Well, now I've got an old TV. Like, just throwing away good stuff, to go buy better stuff is this idea that we fight against, and we try hard to not be. It's funny, in this Amazon world, we're in this conundrum these days because we order all of our organic dry goods, cereals, pastas, salt, whatever, through Amazon, because you can buy organic, you can buy it cheap.
Yeah.
There's all these great advantages, and then of course it shows up in 5 boxes.
Right.
And I feel, like, we're killing trees while we're, eating organically. So it's always something. But I like the saying in addiction recovery, actually, of progress, not perfection. Right. At least it's about being aware. And, when I'm at home, I recycle everything. When I'm on the road, I can't, if I'm in a hotel room, I can't necessarily dictate whether or not something's going to get recycled.
Right.
But I still put it in the right can, and then it's on somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's
the best you can.
Yeah, that's that kind of personal responsibility. So the Sahara really kind of like put us on the map, and made it where I got the chance to do some other stuff. And among that was being on the board of water.org and having this great nonprofit, and then, go off and do other big runs and find my way.
Well, one of the things as part of your story, and again, don't have to spend too much time on it because I want to get to what's next, is you spent a little time in federal prison.
I did indeed. Everybody should.
So, and this was not of your choosing, like the Sahara Desert.
No.
So this was like a challenge that was kind of thrown at you. And what I kind of want to, maybe you can share just briefly the circumstances that led to that happening.
Yeah.
Because it was pretty unfair. So can you maybe share?
Yeah, it's very complicated, but also simple. I was a guy who had a little bit of fame and really not much in the way of money. Mm-hmm. And it was 2010, the heart of the financial crisis in this country. Uh-huh. And, for many years I had a little success in buying a house and fixing it up and selling it. And so I'd done that through the years. And like so many people, I had a home loan that went south when things sort of fell apart. Mm-hmm. And I had a foreclosure, and my house just went back to the bank. And, a mandate came down from the feds. Basically, they were trying to find people to prosecute, basically to blame somebody for the housing collapse, because somebody needed to be blamed, right?
Yeah.
And,
certainly not anybody on Wall Street, though.
No, exactly. So none of the people actually responsible were ever even remotely held responsible. And the shortest version is that I come home one day from running errands, and 6 armed federal agents come out of a coffee shop and handcuff and shackle me and take me to jail, and I don't know what's going on. And the next day I learned that I'm being charged with supposedly overstating my income on a home loan application from 2005. And it was a one of those no document loans,
right?
Where, as the saying went, like if you had a pulse, you could get a loan during those years.
Loans.
Like there was nothing about it, right? It was an Engle loan, exactly right. And this mine was no different than anybody else's. Mortgage broker filled out who I never met.
Yeah.
Voice on the phone, filled out the paperwork, and so I fight it because, first of all, I felt like I hadn't done anything wrong. But even if I had done something that 15 million other people had done,
right.
And I was the only one being held accountable. And I went to court. I went to trial, which very few people actually go to trial against the feds, and I lost, predictably. And I was sentenced to 21 months in federal prison. And they took,
Did
my
you
life.
serve all 21 months?
You get like a 15. As I always say, you get a 15% volume discount. So I served 18 months in Beckley, West Virginia, and in a federal prison, and it cost me everything that I had worked for, or so I thought. And the irony is, I go into prison and I don't know who I'm going to be there, because I'm angry and frustrated, and I'm just generally pissed off. And I figured out pretty quickly, though, that I may not survive the 21 months if I stay bitter and pissed off. And I needed to decide who I was going to be. Fair or unfair didn't matter anymore.
Right.
Like that was now irrelevant. And I think that's, again, that like so many situations, you have to finally come to a point where you say, okay, this isn't fair, or this is not just, but this is the way it is. So who am I going to be? And I started to run, and I ended up starting a running group in prison, and doing yoga in prison, and teaching addiction recovery classes. And by the time I left there, I had a huge running group. I had 25 guys doing yoga 3 days a week with me. And I got to do things that, as I always like to say, they were all so grateful and just such gratitude about how much I had helped them. And what they didn't understand, of course, was I wasn't doing it for them. Part of me was, I hope I'm a decent enough person to want to help other people.
Right.
But that was the only way I was going to get through it. Like, you have to, I like to say, to keep it, you have to give it away. If you have something to offer, if you have a gift or a passion, and you're not willing to share it with other people, regardless of the circumstance, then what are you doing?
Yeah, it's like the Beatles. In the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Exactly right. And so it changed me. So as I was talking about before, I left prison better than I was when I went in. It wasn't just something I had to get through and then hope to, like, for a while, I think early on, I thought I would get out and reclaim my life. Well, that life was gone. There was no getting that life back, nor should I want that life again. Not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that was then. And so who I'm going to be moving forward the goal shouldn't be to mirror something I was in the past. The goal should be to be better than that, right. To learn more, and so what I figured out from the experience too was prison is full of people who don't belong there. 85% of inmates in federal prison are there for some trumped up drug related charge where they and society would be way better off if they'd gone to treatment. Taxpayers would spend half the money. And as I always say, who would you rather have as your neighbor? Some angry dude who just got out of a 15-year prison sentence and had his whole life destroyed, mm-hmm. or some guy who just went to treatment and figured out that he wanted to be clean and sober? Like, which person would you rather live next to? And especially if for a taxpayer, especially if it's half the money. And, prison is a business. And so I actually learned a lot about, just sort of, as they call it, the prison industrial complex. And it's you're a commodity as an inmate. And there's very little, it's incredibly inhuman in this country, and people always say, well, you did a crime, you that's what you deserve, and it's
Right.
just not. It's not that simple. It's not really true. Being incarcerated and away from your family, that's the punishment.
Right.
You shouldn't also be, humiliated and fed, rotten food and denied, compassion and, all of the things. So I got a chance to see all these things firsthand, and I never would have.
And have you taken that experience and are you staying involved in any way
Absolutely.
in that issue?
I mean, most of what I've done is write about it, but
Uh-huh.
I also go into the jails locally and I take AA meetings, and you can't do that in the federal system. Again, it's absolutely asinine.
You can't do
tax-
AA in federal?
No, and taxpayers should be outraged that that the federal system does not allow for traditional addiction recovery programs. It's just
Makes no sense.
bizarre. It makes absolutely no sense. But in their infinite wisdom, it's no longer. There used to be back in the day, at least, a correction side to it. Like there was at least a pretend goal of trying to get people better.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just a punishment. Now that's the way it's viewed, is
Right.
just as pure punishment. And again, for those people that are, the tough on crime crowd, well, that's fine. Are you willing to pay 3 times as much for it?
Right.
So if you want to spend your tax dollars that way to punish people, because they're a drug addict or because they broke into your car to feed their addiction, and look, prison, there's bad people in prison.
Right.
Don't get me wrong. And there's people in there who belong there, because they're violent and they're genuinely harmful to other people. But the vast majority are there for reasons that any of us could be guilty of.
But for the grace of God.
My cellmate was a young kid, 23 years old. He got a 10-year sentence for buying his very first bag of weed from the wrong person.
Oof.
So how many people have bought a bag of weed
still
or a
in
joint
jail?
or whatever? No, he got out last year. So, but it's that's the luck of the draw sometimes.
What is there a difference in how you approach a challenge that you're seeking out, like the Sahara Desert, and one that's kind of thrust upon you outside
No.
of your control?
Actually, there's not, and it's a great question. Because I say it all the time. Who you are is really only revealed when everything falls apart. Normal life doesn't reveal all that much about who we are. But, I like to say that it doesn't matter what happens to you. It only matters what you do about it. So at least in theory, whether the thing that happens to you is something you did to yourself or something that someone else did to you, your approach, in my opinion, should be the same. It should be one of an open heart and curiosity. Even if you can find a way to be curious in the face of absolute disaster, and being generous and even laughing. I made, my friends and family didn't know what to say to me. I get sentenced to prison. I've still got like 90 days before I report to prison. That was like, I was the Walking Dead. What do you say to a person who's getting ready to go off to prison? And so, I began to encourage, the worst prison jokes you've ever heard, or whatever it might be, and laugh, because really, what else are you going to do? If you sit in that stuff, it's so destructive. And it's just, it was another life experience, one that I don't want to have again.
Right.
But it also showed me, too, recidivism rates are so high. So many people go back to prison. And it's not because they're criminals. It's because in some ways the structure of prison is tempting. Because out here, life is hard, man. We all, almost everybody struggles, with bills and relationships and who am I going to be, and especially with social media these days and the pressure of everybody else's amazing life that we all get to see every day.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do, and I think what part of what you do with your podcast, which I admire, is, to me, it's about sharing the struggle. I don't want to go run 100 miles and shoot a little video of it that's all like, rainbows and butterflies. Nobody wants to see that.
Right.
They want to see me throw up on my shoes.
Right.
And hopefully they want to see me, get through it and finish. Maybe not everybody, but hopefully that's what they want. and but they want to see me struggle like hell to get there.
So speaking of that, maybe that's a good segue into what's next.
Yeah.
These guys are going to hit a golf ball here. I thought they were done.
The beer lady showed up. They got distracted. She's both cute and she has beer. Perfect.
I never saw that before. Someone coming out on a golf course to deliver beer.
Yeah, always.
Full service out here in Squaw Valley. They have that on the course tomorrow?
They do. So I don't know. Yeah, probably on the Spartan course. So what's next is this the next big adventure. I call it 5.8, and it basically is this adventure where I'm going to go human powered from the lowest place on the planet, which is the Dead Sea in Jordan, to the highest point on the planet, which is the top of Mount Everest. And it's about 4,500 miles. And I call it 5.8 because while it's 4,500 miles, it's actually only 5.8 vertical miles from the lowest place to the highest. Right, exactly. You can do 5.8, right? Not even a 10K. That's what I keep saying. So everybody can do 5.8. And so the idea is, certainly it's a metaphor for my life and for most of our lives.
The lowest point to the highest
Yeah,
point.
we all spend our lives basically kind of bouncing between these two places and trying to move away from the low points.
Let's see if we can go through
and reach the high points.
That's how did you come up with that idea? Call first. Man, these guys got to...
Talk about a handicap.
Yeah. So how did you come up with that idea?
It really was. I've looked back at notes recently, and to tell you the truth, I had the original idea all the way back in 2008.
Really?
It's been a while, and I was interrupted with my federal holiday, first of all, and and it's taken a while to sort of come back from that, and and I think it just dawned on me one day. What about I have had, I think, an inordinate amount of lows and an inordinate amount of highs in my life. I don't think I'm that different than most people, but part of it is because I've tried to do some hard things. Mm-hmm. I've done them very publicly, and consequently I've paid a little bit of a price for some of that. And so I think it made sense to me, and I had to figure it out. Like, you can't run it, because to run straight from the Dead Sea to Everest, you'd have to cross Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. So that's not happening.
Why not?
No, not anytime soon. I can't run that fast, basically. But believe me,
that would be an adventure, though.
Well, believe me, I looked into it. I didn't discount it completely, because I have a lot of friends in the military who, there's plenty of very safe areas in all of those countries,
right,
or at least relatively safe. But the problem is you only need one really unsafe place that you come across to ruin your whole day.
Yeah.
And so I had to find another way. And
I think an Iraqi prison might be worse than a federal prison.
Exactly. I think so too. And so I made a decision that, looking at a map, I said, okay, I'm gonna run across the Arabian Desert. It's about 2,000 miles across Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Oman. And then I'm actually going to kayak. I'm going to paddle across the Indian Ocean about 1,000 miles. And I'm going to...
self-supported?
Yeah, self-supported. And I'm going to land in Mumbai, India, and I'm going to, from there, get on a mountain bike and bike all the way across India.
How long is it going to take you to kayak across the Indian Ocean?
Well, I figure I can go around 40 miles a day, so it's going to take 3 weeks at least. So
and you have all your food and stuff with you in the kayak?
Yeah, I'll have one of the self-supported, big giant kayak things, and so yes. And and to say I'll be out there fully without support is probably not true. Okay. There will be a film crew, so there will be some overall support, but yeah, and then bike all the way across India to western Nepal, and from there, I have an amazing friend who started an orphanage in western Nepal, and I'm going to go visit her and the kids, and she's built an amazing place. And then I'm going to go all the way across Nepal to Everest Base Camp And then from there, I'm going to climb Everest to the top. And
how long does this whole thing?
The entire thing should take about a little over 4 months.
That's it?
Start to finish, yeah. So, I'll be moving. I'm not out there. I'm not out there hanging out. I'm definitely going to be rolling. So, and it's funny. The other thing is there's the why question is, to me, is very self-evident, but is also this idea of, I do think our planet is in trouble, environmentally. And while I don't think it's effective to beat people over the head with the destruction of the planet, because I think people are sort of numb to that. I want to show people how freaking beautiful this place is. And so, there will be, everything from a TV show and film and web series and blog and podcast and anything that I can create out of it to tell the story along the way, I'll have it. So, I'm excited. I mean, I'm ready to get out and
Is there
explore.
anything you could do to make that a little bit harder?
I can't think of it.
Well, you
right
said
now.
You mentioned something earlier.
I
but
could
you're going
kayak
to go
with one hand.
Well, aren't you going to free dive down to the bottom?
Oh, indeed, I am going to do that. That is going to make it harder. So I'm not a diver, but at the beginning in the Dead Sea, I'm going to swim out to in the middle of the Dead Sea, and I'm actually going to free dive. I'm hoping 100 feet, which if you look at, world records and professional free divers, 100 feet is like nothing for them. But for me, that's a lot, especially in a body of water like the Dead Sea too. It's
very thick.
It would be an accomplishment.
Yeah.
And so, so that's the goal. My joke is always that I want to make it. If somebody else comes behind me and they want to, break the record or whatever, they're gonna have to try hard. That's just one more thing they're gonna have to do.
And you said you're gonna bring a little bit of the Dead Sea up to the top of Everest.
I am, yeah. I'm gonna fill a little flask from the Dead Sea with very salty water, and I'm gonna pour it out on the top of Everest when I get there. And
that's so cool.
In a way to just to kind of I'm a mix of environmentalist, but also pragmatist. I want a healthy planet, and it's such a beautiful place, and I don't think that not enough people get out and experience it for themselves. And my hope is that it could encourage others to self-made adventures are great. I love Spartan racing, and Joe DeSena and Spartan have actually agreed to come on board my expedition.
Oh, that's cool.
So they're going to be one of the sponsors, and
that's great.
One of the things I'm doing for them these days, another big project, is I'm launching what's called Spartan Trail.
Right.
So the first trail race for Spartan, pure trail, no obstacles, is going to be October the 13th. So it's coming up. I don't even know if this will have aired by then, but it's in Virginia, and we've already got about 300 people signed up, and that's about all we wanted for that first one. But, the idea is, again, just what Spartan obstacle course racing has done for, getting a whole lot of people, out of the gym and outside. I love, things like, CrossFit and all of the things. I mean, they got people, exercising.
Yeah.
But we want to get people outside,
still that's
do
the
those
point
things.
of this podcast. Nobody listening to this is sitting down. We're all out.
That's it.
Outside, up and walking. Maybe they're on a treadmill.
That's it. Well, treadmill's fine, but they do need to get outside and out the door in the sunshine or the rain or the snow.
Take us back to the rain, right?
Yeah.
Running in the rain.
That's it. Because those things are just as interesting.
Yeah. So, Charlie, thank you very much for walking with us. We've had a beautiful walk here.
It's been amazing.
And grateful to you for sharing your story with us and your next adventure with us.
Yeah.
Is there a call to action you'd like to make to...
Absolutely. I'm a very easy person to find, and everything lives on charlieengle.com.
Okay.
So it's just one place, and I'm kind of an Instagram person these days. It goes to Twitter and Facebook, but generally it gets posted on Instagram, and it's just Charlie Engle.
Cool.
there. So all the things about the everything from the trail running to the 5.8 project live on the website.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I hope
Thank you for having
out
me.
there is as inspired by you as I am.
Yeah.
I'm
going to bring you guys along on the journey.
Awesome.
So don't you
and
worry.
We'll share it out.
Yeah. Great.
Put it on the newsletter. All right.
Great.
Thanks to everybody for walking with us. Thank you, Charlie. Every mile matters. That was awesome.
Sweet, dude.